Welcome into the Valley News Live Sports Overtime Podcast. It's a different feel this week, a different vibe because it's game week. Finally,
Yes,
we made it
yes.
back. North Dakota State opening their season this weekend. We had a lot of action last weekend as well, still even without the Bison in action. So we'll get to that in a moment. But of course, the task at hand, North Dakota State getting ready to open the year in a really big way. Devin Fry joined by Jack Wallace. Jack, we're making our first trip to U.S. Bank Stadium this weekend. Well, to see a North Dakota State game.
Yeah, no, well, it's first trip for anyone to see a college football game at U.S. Bank Stadium. That was, just to point it out because it was exciting to see, but I think it was a poll by The Athletic that pointed out U.S. Bank Stadium as their number one stadium in the league.
Nice.
Which, as someone that's been to a decent chunk on the list, like Atlanta Stadium, Dallas is, like there's some really good stadiums up there, and U.S. Bank is quite the treat to get to go see a game there. So now for a college crowd, it'll be kind of neat to just see the green and gold be there instead of purple.
And there should be a good contingent of North Dakota State fans. Of course, we don't know what the numbers look like yet at this point. From what we've seen on like Ticketmaster sites, it doesn't look completely full yet, but a lot of fans, I know our Bison fans very well, a lot of them are going to be getting them from the building itself. So,
Yeah, that's true.
It should be a pretty good contingent of North Dakota State fans there. I don't know how well Eastern Washington is going to travel, but I imagine for the Athletic just named it the top stadium in the country. They got to make a little trip out there.
I sure hope so. But
we'll see. We'll see again which we know North Dakota State fans will be there. We'll see what Eastern Washington does. Now it's a little bit more of a trip for our friends from Cheney there.
So seeing the exact drive, well, it's 20 hours and 34 minutes. So that is just a little bit of time because it turns out Montana is quite a big state. So
yeah, you got to get through the whole thing. You can't just get like halfway through Montana.
That's a good way.
And
There will be people.
Construction.
There will be folks who make that drive and won't fly. I'm certain there will be, and I commend them more than anyone else there, honestly, because that is a drive that I do not envy, even though it is through a pretty beautiful part of the country.
I hope most of them fly, but we'll see.
I'd fly.
They're eagles. You gotta
They could
fly.
literally fly.
Yeah, they're birds.
Perhaps.
North Dakota State versus Eastern Washington, that is such a very, like when that game got announced as taking place, it became an extremely hot ticket. Two historical programs in the FCS level. Of course, Eastern Washington known for playoff runs, the Bison known for winning national championships. And, it's the two top conferences again in the FCS. Again, no offense to our SoCon fans or anybody else out there. I know everyone has their own opinions, but when you look at just who's competing for national championships and who's competing in playoffs,
Most every metric you can measure.
right, it's the Big Sky and the Missouri Valley, and so those two conferences have some good representation here. And this is just the tip of the iceberg for Mountain West, the Missouri Valley. Stay tuned.
Maybe someday.
For the Missouri Valley and the Big Sky, of course, South Dakota State, Montana State going head-to-head later this year as well. So just a lot to look forward to, but it all starts at U.S. Bank Stadium. I played in the Twin Cities in college once. We played some.
pretty fun.
We played some team from Iowa. I don't even remember who it was, but it made the Metrodome was like the middle point, and so we leased out the Metrodome. They didn't let us change in the players' locker rooms. We had to use like the cheerleader locker rooms, which was cool. We were still in the Metrodome.
Still counts.
There were about a few hundred people in there, and so it was just echoing off of every surface. Every single person I was on that Mayville State team with has a picture somewhere on their social media of them warming up at U.S. Bank Stadium or at the Metrodome because we were just so excited. No, and none of us have come close to an NFL stadium again. So I mean, it works out. We'll go ahead and mute that sound there. But no, Eastern Washington. Historically a power, they may be kind of limping into this one this year. They went 3-8 last season. They were picked to finish 7th in the Big Sky coming into this year. New faces too, so we don't necessarily know what we're going to get from them. They have a new offensive coordinator and just plenty of spots to fill up on that roster. But thankfully, with them being so young, that may mean that we may see some big improvements from last year. But again, we just don't know what we're going to see with this group right now.
Well, even looking at the history of these two teams, they've only played each other a grand total of 5 times coming into this game, and 2 of those 5 times were either playoffs or the national championship,
Right.
one of them being sort of a funny matchup in the spring season, that's spring 2021 after COVID or kind of during COVID, really.
I remember that.
So sort of those meetings during all that, they've only met twice actually during the months of essentially August through November, really the normal months for football, both of which were in September, and both of which the Bison won. That was in 2016, 2017. They hadn't played each other since that weird COVID spring season, which was April 2021, late April for these two teams.
Cam Miller's first start. Why is Siri talking to me right now?
Siri's excited as well.
Siri's also very excited for this game. All of my electronics are going off all at once right now. But no, I think that that Eastern Washington game was Cam Miller's first official start in that bizarre COVID season.
Which even with that game, Eastern Washington led by 7 at the end of the first quarter. NDSU led by only 1 at halftime. And the Bison would win by 22 at the end of the game.
Massive second half.
It's coming from, so, it's one of these games come from behind and sort of getting their act together and winning, which you can sort of see a little bit of the, not surprising, that was sort of the Cam Miller game of sort of getting punched in the mouth early and sort of going like, whoa, okay, and getting back up and winning. And again, as you said, this isn't exactly the Eastern Washington team that we're used to from the past. They're kind of in a funny limbo of a state right now, but that even means even more for NDSU to come in and just absolutely make this as clean and stress-free of a game as they can, because if you can just get this done, you have the next few weeks are not particularly difficult.
Not marquee games.
They're not really huge games, and you want to go into that sort of much tougher late September, early October period where the games are going to get hyped up and have a lot of tough teams in that sort of 3-4 game stretch in the midseason.
And looking at where Eastern Washington finished last year, you said it perfectly. It's not quite the Eastern Washington that we're used to seeing. They were 11th out of 12 teams in the Big Sky on defense, on defensive statistics, and 8th on offense. And when I think of Eastern Washington, I think of big offenses on the red turf. And so that we'll see what the new faces bring to the table this year. We look forward to this one, of course. It's NDSU's first regular season neutral site game since they played Butler at Target Field in 2019.
Well, if it means anything with the scoring thing, I looked up their own stats on their website. Eastern Washington only scored 10 touchdowns on the ground last season. They allowed 34.
Wow, okay. So that's probably going to be an area that they've tried to address. We'll see how that comes around.
Passing the same.
Yeah.
That's crazy. They allowed 25, they scored 25 through the air.
Fascinating.
So I'm saying the running attack, if it's a repeat of last season, we know teams change. If it's a repeat of last season, then NDSU's licking their chops.
Let's hope for a big Tamarick Williams game right off the bat.
Lots of highlights going.
Get that Walter. Yeah, let's just hope for a lot of highlights in the first half. Yes. I'm being selfish about that one. We talked a little bit to head coach Matt Entz about this contest yesterday in our first weekly presser of the season, and here's what he had to say about this matchup.
Good to see everyone. Good afternoon. Excited to be here. Excited for the season to get going. Excited to play in an NFL venue down in Minneapolis here in about 5 days. So a lot of things to look forward to, a lot of things to find out about the current team that we have right now. You always anticipate you're going to be prepared, but there's going to be things that pop up, issues, situations that arise on any given Saturday. We feel like we've done a good job of preparing this group. They've had great energy, great focus throughout the entire 3.5 weeks leading up to this game. So really look forward to it. I know we have I think Coach Best does a really good job out at Eastern Washington. I know just from the expectations, that program, I'm sure last year didn't go as planned, but you look at the number of close games they had. I anticipate a much improved defense. I know offensively, they can challenge you just with their tempo, with the number of skilled athletes they have. A new quarterback, very little film on him, but I do know he can not only hurt you with his arm, but with his feet as well. 4 of 5 offensive linemen returning, a number of skilled kids on the defensive side. Looks like they have some veteran presence at all levels. So it's going to be a challenging game. I don't think we've ever played Eastern Washington and ever felt like it wasn't going to be challenging. We're going to have to play really good football in all 3 phases. The word complementary football has been echoed numerous times throughout our facility, and we'll continue to echo it as this season or as this week goes on. We need all 3 phases to help one another. And for us to do that, we have to be really well prepared. We need to understand all our checks, all our adjustments throughout the course of the game, and we need to be superior at the fundamentals of the game. We need to be able to get off blocks, tackle. We need to be able to maintain blocks, catch, run, all that stuff. All the things that sometimes you take for granted, we need to do it at a really high level. With that, I'll open it up for questions.
Start the year with that destination game aspect. What does it mean for not just you guys, but for the program as a whole to kind of get the season going on such a high note?
Well, it's a unique opportunity. It's not something that I think the last time we did this was 2019 back in Minneapolis. And with the volume of kids we have, not just from the metropolitan area, but also from the state of Minnesota. I think I counted, 16 or 17 guys in our two deep probably that are from Minnesota. It has a ton of value, especially when you start talking about recruiting as well. I think it's probably the area of our greatest alumni population. And so another opportunity for our alumni to be engaged with our football program and also to engage with one another. And so I see it as a win-win. Now, we got to go down there and play really well. We got to go down there and enjoy the opportunity, but we got to make the most of it as well.
The offensive line battle and why Sundell at left tackle and Brandon at center?
Well, over the course of the last couple of years, Brandon's played a lot of games for us at center and has started a number of big games for us. And when we've been able to win with him at center, he does a nice job of, all the things that are required. ID and protections, ID in the run game. He's in tune with Cam, our quarterback, and Jalen is a very talented, athletic player. I think it'd be silly for us not to have our 5 best players out there. And so that what you're seeing is just us trying to find ways to get the 5 best players out there. And this isn't the first time we've ever done anything like that. It may be first time with the offensive line, but there's been other positions where we've had to adjust people or move people around to get our most talented players on the field.
Or especially recently, a group you can kind of shuffle around, find guys in different spots. What's it say about that group that each of them are able to step up at different spots on the line?
Well, I think it says, a couple things. One, the willingness just to be good. Coach, it doesn't matter where I play. If I'm playing right tackle this snap and I play center the next snap, whatever I need to do to help this football team be successful. So probably a great example of Bison pride is we would, define it in our meeting rooms or in our team room. But also, I have to give kudos and some credit to Coach Larson. Has done a great job of moving people around day to day, week to week, so we could have this opportunity. You have to prepare for what ifs, too. We play a physical brand of football. We play a line of scrimmage-oriented philosophy is what we execute here at NDSU. And we have to be prepared for what happens if a helmet comes off. Well, who are we replacing? Who's the 6th guy? Who's the next tackle? Do we get in Ogre? What does that look like? And so throughout the duration of fall camp, we've tried to challenge our guys. And when you have, 3, and you can even say, 4 or 5 veterans that are here, they should be at a point in their career where we can challenge them a little bit.
As opposed to, say, what we've seen the last few years of just a non-conference game at home. Kind of what's the biggest difference been for you guys leading into this first game week?
Well, of course, the travel is going to be slightly different. And, anytime you're not staying in town, but that would be the main one. Just making sure we have everything. We have some first-time players, first-time staff members on our team, so making sure everyone has kind of what the logistics look like, what the details are in the travel, meeting time, what they need to pack. Some of those things that are, the typical fan's not going to see. Those are probably the things that make me a little bit nervous.
Starting the year on a big stage against a relatively unknown offense, how much more important do those fundamentals become?
Well, you always want to be superior in the fundamental, especially when you're playing a no-huddle team. I think the reasons why teams jump into no huddle or into tempo, because they want to create poor communication. They want to get you off your spots, get you uncomfortable. It's not necessarily they're looking to beat you with technique. They're looking to beat you with airs. And so we have made a huge priority of we need to be fundamentally superior in this game. And what's that look like? Getting off blocks, tackling, maintaining blocks, making catches, making the throws, just the basic fundamentals. Now, the first part of your question, I don't think this is an unknown offense. I think every kid on our team realizes the tradition, the success that Eastern Washington's had, not only at the quarterback position, but also at the wide receiver position. We quickly reminded them how talented they've been in the past. So I don't think there's a soul in our football facility that's overlooking this opportunity. All right, appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Well, we'll expect to hear more from the Bison throughout this week. Of course, we're talking to the players today, and we'll hear from them later on Valley News Live. I'm going to plug my own sportscast on my podcast.
Well, there you go.
Because I'm allowed to do that.
It'll work out.
Other North Dakota State news, volleyball. Heck of a way to start their season, dominating the Vandal Invitational. Now starting the season at 3-0, and none of the games were really particularly close either.
3-1 win, 3-1 win, 3-1 win.
Perfect.
All three in a row.
Almost perfect. You could I guess demand sweeps if you wanted to.
Which they haven't done yet, which I know is like oh boy, I haven't had a sweep when you're 3-0. But it's UC Riverside, Seattle, and Idaho were the three teams, of course, hosted by Idaho, so they played all three of those teams. Wrapping up that tournament, they have the Dayton tournament in Dayton, Ohio, up against Butler, the host Dayton, and then Ohio University, the Bobcats. Those three games will happen this Friday and Saturday, which unfortunately don't help us a lot of that, with just how much we have with our Friday show. And then, of course, Saturday's an all-day event in US Bank Stadium. But we'll try to get to as much as we can when they get back home. That's in a couple weeks. Their home opener up against Portland State Toledo, and then they'll I think they're just the winners playing that game.
Correct.
It's another little tournament. These invitationals tend to work like that.
The NDSU tournament, as it's called on their schedule.
So it'll be fun.
We can gussy up the name a little bit. That's my only complaint. NDSU, you work on that. You heard it here first. The Bison soccer team got their first win of the season on Friday night over Austin P. They then lost to Drake, but they got that win under their belt. They had a tie and a loss going into the weekend, so 1-2-1 to start the year. And now we're gonna make a quick drive up north. Well, not literally, just kind of a figurative.
Not yet, at least.
A podcast drive. We'll make an actual drive up north coming up soon. UND football, they start their season at home. Always a good sign when UND gets to play in the Alara Center, especially doing so early. They're going to be opening the action up against Drake. Jack, you were just up there for Media Day. Kind of what were your big impressions from what you've kind of seen from this team, just in the little bit that we've seen and heard from them, obviously, in the offseason?
They're kind of it's a funny situation because you hear from coaches and players every year, which they said too, of like, this team's different, this year's different, this bit is. But the funniest thing is that if you look at UND's season last season, I think it would be kind of hard to qualify that as anything less than a mild success.
Right.
You had a winning schedule. You played in a very hard conference. You took NDSU to a somewhat close game at points. You played South Dakota State mostly close throughout the game. And again, you had to go to Fargo, and you had South Dakota State at home.
Right.
But the Alara Center is still the fortress that it always was, even taking the best team in the country with SDSU down to the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
Played a great game. And now you come into the season with a good amount of your guys back. And, yeah, you're missing guys like Garrett Mogg. They're not every piece is back, but a lot of guys are back. And
especially, I don't mean to interrupt you, but especially like in the lines,
yes.
The offensive and defensive lines,
yes.
up front, and then that front seven on defense, they seem to be pretty put together. Okay.
And then even if you look at their first, and I know FCS, you can't evenly split it with 11 games, but even if you just look at their first 5 games, how much of an absolutely wild roller coaster it is. You have Drake starting off, that is not super great in the Pioneer League, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And then you have Northern Arizona, a relatively tougher team that UND played great in one of the best games of the season they played.
And that's honestly that harkens back to the Big Sky days, and the fans also get very hyped up for Northern Arizona games. So
yeah, and then that's a big game. Then you go to Boise State in the blue turf, which I'm thrilled about. Then you go to South Dakota State in Brookings.
Tough. That's a tough stretch of the schedule.
That's a hard
at
2
Boise
games.
And then at South Dakota State.
And then right after that, you play Western Illinois, that last season was one of the weaker teams in all of FCS, and is in fact did poorly enough in there that they're leaving the whole conference, which not to talk about it, but like it wasn't working out.
No.
And so you have sort of these very funny up and down games of these super, super winnable games at home that would almost be surprising if you were to drop any of them.
Right.
And then these gauntlets on the road. And then even the rest of the season, the other road game they play, they then have North Dakota State at home, obviously very tough team, but you're at home.
Right.
Northern Iowa, looks like they're going to be one of the better teams in the conference on the road. Then Indiana State, who's, again, this sort of weaker team at home. So they have this funny stretch. And the biggest thing that I talked about with the guys there, which is sort of an overarching thing, was you have 6 home games. Because even after all that, you have a couple more road, and then Illinois State ends the season, which was a tougher team. They had they had some good games in there, but isn't a world beater.
Right.
And you have the schedule where it is absolutely possible for them to win all of their home games, if not maybe NDSU, but they give a run for their money.
Yep. The Alara Center is always a good equalizer. The 2 years ago in the strange COVID season, they went undefeated at home. The year after that, they had one loss at home. The season after that, one loss at home once again. So they don't tend to lose in the Alara Center. So
they can win a lot of games.
Starting the year at home against an opponent like Drake, it's kind of the opposite approach of what NDSU. It looked like NDSU attempted to do with the scheduling of Eastern Washington in US Bank Stadium right away. That one's more of a destination game for the fans and for the players that they recruit. They could say, hey, we get these opportunities. UND, this seems more like a traditional, not to call Drake a tune-up game. No disrespect to the Drake Bulldogs, of course, but they're going to have an opportunity to work some kinks out in a very winnable game, as you called it, at home.
And they should sort of have that down. In Northern Arizona, I would think the same too. It's a team that they've had this experience against. They played a great game. It was just this crazy back and forth, and were able to close it out on the road. And again, you look at the schedule, and let's say for just the sake of the argument, they sweep their home slate, and which includes NDSU. But let's say they sweep that. You only got to win one road game to match your record from last season. And I think if you're going to win all those games, you're probably going to win more than one road game.
Right.
And in that case, it's like UND is sort of set up to have a much bigger improvement than last season, which I think even regardless of the Bison game, they should have a better season than last season. And I think last season wasn't even bad. So it's an exciting time.
They've also become a playoff team. UND is now a play. We expect them to make the playoffs every year. And so that's been a very cool thing to see that kind of grow. And of course, speaking of you up in Media Day, talked to Quincy Vaughn about his move to tight end. I know we've kind of beat that to death here, but you get to see the full story in and of itself on Valley News Live coming up this week, so be sure to stay tuned. UND volleyball in action over the weekend, starting the year. They're going to have a hill to climb from this one, starting their year in a tournament, going 0-3 there. Nowhere to go but up, which is nice.
Yeah, it's a tough start, but again, it's good that they have a long season.
Yeah, it's a very long season. Women's soccer, they're in the exact same position that North Dakota State was. They're starting the year at 1-2-1. Their one win was over MSUM. They tied Austin Peay. Speaking of MSUM, we're going to move on to some other college teams in our area. But I guess before I get into MSUM and Concordia starting their season this weekend, we had ourselves the paint bucket game. You made a quick trip to Valley City for the historic matchup, Valley City State and Jamestown, one of the longest rivalries in our area, as they met for, I don't want to call it my favorite trophy because MSUM and Bemidji State have a giant axe, if I recall.
Which is cool. And I have seen, cool. I was at that game and I was able to witness the axe in person.
I think Barnesville and Hawley have a giant oar as well. That might be one too.
Sense.
So there's a lot of cool trophies in our area, but a paint bucket, that's got to be pretty high up there.
It was pretty neat, and that game was a lot of fun. It wasn't as insane as the game last season, which is a little unfair because that was one
you can't compare it to an overtime classic.
It was unbelievable. Rude, this game was a little clear, but it was sort of a funny game because the Jimmies got started off with a 53-yard touchdown.
Yeah.
And made a 2-point conversion off a fake play, which I was sort of like, okay,
it was just a direct snap, and he just kind of took it himself, right?
Well, and then with under a minute to go in the half, then VCSU responds, doesn't go for two, so they're still down 7 at halftime, and then the game just blew up.
Yep.
I mean, 13 points for VCSU in the third, another 3 added on by the Vikings in the fourth, and all of a sudden, and the Jimmies did score again, but it ended up being an 8-point win in a game that really throughout the second half, even though it was only a 1-score difference, it was 100% Vikings by that time, at home too.
And, the score can be whatever it is. The momentum is the biggest factor for any of that. And it was also kind of a comeback for Avery Thorsgaard. He got the starting job last season, but got hurt last season
in
as
his
well.
first career start, which was against Jamestown.
And exactly. So he showed some flashes last season, but then was able to come back in full force for this game. 190 yards, 2 touchdowns, no picks. I think he also he might have led the team in rushing, or maybe was high. Yeah, no, he led the team in rushing as well with 80 yards there. And so
9 attempts.
Yeah, so a big coming out party for Avery Thorsgaard. And Valley City, for them, for me at Mayville State, beating Valley City was our big game. for Valley City beating Jamestown is their big game. And so it's good to start the year off with a rivalry win, of course. Now they head to South Dakota Mines in Rapid City, South Dakota. We have some friends down there who could probably hook us up with highlights. I'm just keeping that in mind for myself. So if you're listening to this, Vic, I would love highlights from Valley City State against School of Mines. Jamestown now, I'm looking up to see where they go as they continue their season. Of course, at the D3 level, they're going to be at Midland University in Nebraska. So that's going to be on Saturday. yeah, everyone's hitting the road. Concordia and MSUM also starting their seasons on the road. MSUM playing Wayne State. They're actually going to start our year for us a little bit early in Wayne, Nebraska on Thursday night. Some Thursday night lights for our NSIC teams.
Fun but unusual. So it's nice to see them getting that kind of game. It's actually it's the only game of the season that's not a Saturday at noon, 1 or 2. So
they're consistent except for this 6 p.m. Thursday game, which
it's a little strange.
Speaking of consistency, though, the Concordia Cobbers starting the year on Saturday at 1 p.m. They're going to be playing Wisconsin Eau Claire. So we're going to be keeping up with as much of that as we can. Of course, very busy for your boys with with high school football starting. And I don't want to jump too far ahead of ourselves, but Minnesota high school football starts on Thursday as well. So it's just kind of football day in Minnesota.
Lots of Thursday night football. Well, it should be a thing.
If it's not a thing, we're going to make it a thing. I know hockey night's a thing. We're going to go ahead and get football night started. And one last look through for our other college teams in the area, MSUM volleyball. They start their season on Friday night as well. I believe more tournament action. So just tournaments for
makes sense. Before non-conference ends, most of that slate tends to be tournaments for all these teams.
All right, let's move on to high school sports. We had a heck of a Friday night for week 1. Our 3A teams back in action, kind of joining the fray a little bit here, and we were busy. We were busy boys, but not as busy as some of our local teams. Shanley and Davies, our 25th Street friends, they got the win at home over visitors from out west. Shanley defeating Bismarck, Davies with a win over Mandan. Shanley dominated. Davies was a little bit closer than I'm sure they would have wanted, and it was a real defensive battle, especially through the first half of that one. So Davies with a 20-9. You don't see that scoreline very often.
No, it's tricky, but Mandan's a pretty solid team. So getting a win like this means a lot, especially for a unit that, in all likelihood, you're not going to see again in the season. And so to get a win like that's a pretty big deal. Same thing for Shanley, really sort of hitting Bismarck in the mouth. Obviously, Bismarck High with the Demons. They're not particularly higher up, at least in the out west
not in the standing
at least.
Right, not in the projections coming into the year.
It is good for Shanley to get that win. Obviously, Shanley is one of, if not the best team at that level for being defending state champs. It's expected that they will do well, and same thing for West Fargo Cheyenne. I mean, the Mustangs having a great season last year, getting cut very short against Century, and come back to Bismarck and play Legacy, not Century, but to get a win like that is meaningful. And then West Fargo, who has a solid start and pretty by far the closest game that was played at that level.
Probably my favorite kind of game with a 46-40 shootout there. Century appears to be good. West Fargo falling 46-40 to Century in Bismarck to open up their season. Cheyenne with a win over Bismarck Legacy to open up theirs. So I think the biggest takeaway for our 3A teams is every team in the East appears to be solid. West Fargo falling to Century, you can't fault them for a 46-40 loss. When you score 40 points, you should probably win the game. Yeah. So you can't really fault them for that. Century just appears to be also very good. So we'll see how this continues to shake out as we move into further into the season. Our 3A teams play each other coming up this week.
Before we go to 2A, with the 3A games next week, to not focus on the West, but just for the East games, it's West Fargo hosting Shanley and West Fargo Cheyenne hosting Davies. So those two games, both in West Fargo, which is convenient, but that will make it where it's it'll shake out a lot going forward of being like, how well can West Fargo shake off that loss if Shanley really is good as we all think they are, and same thing for Davies and Cheyenne, and both winning, both looking good, sort of who just is the better between these two teams that have a strong start.
I certainly appreciate that they're playing each other that early.
It helps.
It helps me. Moving down to the AA level, Fargo North dominated for the second consecutive week, 48-7 win over Grand Forks Central. Grand Forks Central was coming off of their season opening win. So, I mean, North appears to be the team to beat in AA right now, at least on the EDC side of things.
Peter Haugo had a lot of fun.
And there was a big guy touchdown. Watch
There
our
was?
highlights. Watch our highlights
Yes.
on ValleyNewsLive.com from
That was
this
nuts.
AA game. A blocked punt lands into the hands of a lineman, and he takes it to the house.
He gets a hurdle
He
in, too.
hurdles
He
over
gets a
an
hurdle
opponent.
in. It's awesome.
It's real. That's the thing that happened. Speaking of North and South, Fargo South also dominant, beating Williston, a 3A team, by 30 points. So North and South, it's kind of fun that our Fargo North and Fargo South both appear to be very good. When they inevitably play each other this season, that's going to be must-see TV for sure.
That'll be fun.
Another headline coming out of AA this past week: Grand Forks Red River upsetting defending state champion Jamestown, a 33-28 win in Grand Forks. So Red River also starting the year at 2-0. If I had any rankings ability, it would probably go Fargo North, Red River, and Fargo South.
Well,
so,
speaking of those teams, and this is way looking ahead, but just because I found this happens to be the same week, on September 22nd, which is week 5, so ways from now, but just to point it out,
A week
not
before my
only
wedding.
not only is that Fargo North, Fargo South play that weekend, but at the same time, Red River, one of the better teams in 11A, or I think 11 AA. It says
yep,
11A.
AA.
It says 11A
Right.
here, so I must be mistaken. But in 11 AA goes to Cheyenne.
Ooh, that is fun.
So how about that for sort of
What
a
a
crazy
week.
game? Yeah, and it works also because Davies, Shanley, and West Fargo are all out west that weekend.
Right.
So it makes it where Cheyenne's holding it down here.
And it also works because I'll be here this weekend. I won't be
Yes.
there the next weekend. So.
That will be helpful.
No,
Lots
good,
of fun games.
Good news for that one. But yeah, no, and that about does it for our AA level. It looks like it's going to be a race between North, South, and Red River, and we'll see who comes out on top.
Yeah.
Of course, that's on the east side of things. I'm still unable to keep up with Bismarck as well as I would like to. And moving down to Single A, Kindred comes in with a marquee matchup for the second week in a row, and they dominate this one. They with a 41-12 victory over Cavalier. Kindred appears to be all the way back.
They're
And
the
so-
team to beat in the East because
Yes.
Velva, Garrison Drake, Animus, or just Velva for short. But
Right.
they dominated Beulah out west. They're currently at least in terms of the rankings that are on here, are the #1 team.
Right.
Which
And-
shouldn't be shocking as a defending state
Exactly.
champions.
They might have a dynasty starting out there. So we'll see where that goes. But of course, out in the East, it looks like Kindred is 100% back. Central Cass getting their win back, 7-0 victory over Oaks.
Hey, weird game.
A bizarre
7-0.
game.
We won't see a lot.
We had some more fun highlights from that one. You can check those out on our website as well. And one that we weren't able to go to, but we were shocked to find, Lisbon with a 28-14 win over Hillsborough Central Valley.
How about that?
HCV started the year off with a big win over Mayport. They appeared to be
They
firing
look
on
great,
all
yeah.
cylinders. Lisbon came into their house and handed them a 28-14 loss. So we'll see what we're probably going to have to start paying a little bit more attention to Lisbon. The Broncos
Yeah.
might be legit this year, so we're going to pay way more attention to what's going on out there. Now, taking a quick glance over at 9-man, Sargent County now moving to 2-0 in their first season at the 9-man level. They played Oak Grove. They beat Oak Grove 47-7. Lemoore Litchfield Marion with a 66-0 win over Enderlin there. And there was another 70 burger around here. Let me find it. Though there's 2 in Region 2. North Prairie with a 74-24 win over Larimore, and St. John with a 72-36 win over Midway at Minto. So the 9-man games continue to not be particularly close. Even the team that many consider to be the top one in 9-man, defending state champions, New Salem Almont, a 30-0 win over Hettinger Scranton. So the top teams in 9-man appear to be dominating the early action so far. We're going to try to get out there to a 9-man game next. We just have so much going on around here.
Yeah, it's tough.
But yeah, no, coming up, we'll talk a little bit more about what we expect to see next week as the high school football season continues. But it's been an interesting couple of weeks. There's been a lot of things that have gone kind of the way we thought it would, with just enough surprises in there. Like I feel like in high school sports, it tends to be the team that you think is going to be good is, the team with either the most players or the longest history. They tend to be good. But then this year we seem to have, like Kindred, for example, who's been very successful just the last few seasons alone. But then you have some surprises like Lisbon stunning HCV. So
it takes a minute for high school teams to rotate in or out enough talent to make a huge difference. Obviously, random upsets and weird things can happen. We saw that with Cheyenne last year, where on paper that team was good enough to go all the way to state, if not win it, and then boom, first round you're out. So which is the nature of sports entirely. But it's
that's why you play the games.
Interesting to see, because then you have Century who made that huge run sort of out of nowhere. That you get these sort of different teams to make these big different moves.
Going from football to football, Davies and Shanley are the only unbeaten EDC teams left already. Davies, of course, is 2-0. I sent you...
Davies, big shocker.
I know. I sent you a very fun stat that I think it was Davies Soccer has not lost a regular season game since September of 2020. So we'll see how that continues.
Unbelievable.
They had a... I was at this game. Their second win of the season came against Fargo North, and it got... there's some heat there between those two schools. They've switched some coaches back and forth there, and that was one of the chippier soccer games I've ever seen. So you don't tend to hear that too often, I guess. But Shanley is also 2-0-1. They're the only unbeaten EDC teams left. However, in volleyball, we have 3 unbeaten teams still, and these were in tournaments too. Davies, Cheyenne, and North, all starting the year with multiple wins. And so good, strong starts to them.
Expect that for Cheyenne, too.
Yeah. We're going to move on to our spotlight story this week, and this time I'm taking it over. This one's mine.
You got it.
Thank you.
There you go.
Thank you for letting me have the spotlight for once. Riley Sunram, Division I commit to the University of Minnesota for the Kindred Vikings, funnily enough. One of the biggest kids I've ever been around. At 6'6", 280, I believe his measurements were. So he's going to go play defensive line for the Minnesota Golden Gophers. And of course, that story I feel has been done to death. But one thing that hasn't been done to death is the fact that he is on every single special team besides kickoff return. He kicks off for the Vikings. He kicks field goals and extra points for the Vikings. He punts for the Vikings. He had some booming punts against Central Cass, too. So, and there was an unexpected angle that I had totally blanked on when I went to go talk to him. Coach mentioned it to me that his sister actually beat him out for the starting kicker job his sophomore year. And then I was like, oh, I did that story 2 years ago on Jordan Sunram becoming the first female football player in the history of the Kindred football team. And now here I am doing a story on her brother, who is one of the biggest human beings I've ever seen in my entire life, and also is very good at kicking. So,
what are the odds?
Yeah, and I asked him, by the way, this didn't make the package, so I'm going to go ahead and just mention it here. I asked him if he's bringing the kicking game with him to Minnesota, and he said no. He's just going to focus on D-line, and I didn't push the issue further.
That's as far as we know yet.
Right. When maybe PJ Fleck will see this story on this podcast that he's definitely going to listen to, and then he will be like, you know what? Kid's going to kick. Anyway, no more wasting time.
He would then change up everything. He's like, yes, this is what I'm doing now.
Well, let's check it out. This is Riley Sunram, large human being and kicker for the Kindred Vikings. He stands out on either side of the field for the Kindred Vikings. Whether it's moving bodies on the offensive line or making tackles on the defensive line, it's hard to miss Minnesota Gopher commit Riley Sunram. The 6'5", 280-pounder has made a name for himself for his play in the trenches, but also contributes in a way many wouldn't expect. Sunram is also the kicker and punter for the Vikings, doing everything he can to help his team succeed.
If I'm the best kicker, I guess I'll do the kicking. It's not that bad for me, so I enjoy it too. It's just a little different, but I wasn't great at it right away. It obviously took some learning, but just doing whatever I can for the team.
He's got an awesome leg, and he's a really good athlete. So he had, I think it was 3 or 4 punts on Friday night where he totally flipped the field, and that was such an advantage for us defensively. He's 3 for 3 on PATs, and we always say points are points. They all matter. So he's a really skilled player, so he's in that role.
Kicking seems to run in the family here. His sister Jordan was the kicker for the Vikings during Riley's sophomore season, becoming the first female football player in school history in the process. Riley, who said that he actually lost the kicking job to Jordan that season, gives her the credit for unlocking this kicking gene.
She just played soccer, so she kind of knows all that kicking stuff, but we don't really have soccer in the family, so she was the first one to kind of do that. But yeah, she just kind of taught me how to do it, and I kind of learned, so it was nice for me to have her do that for me.
If you go to a Kindred game this season, you'll see a lot of Riley on the field. He's on offense, defense, and every special team besides kickoff return, a level of versatility that has set him apart as one of the top prospects in the state.
He's going to do what he can for his team to be put in a good position. And if that's kicking the extra point, if that's punting on 4th down rather than going to the sideline and getting a drink of water, that's what he's going to do, and it's awesome.
I won't really brag about it, I would say, but I mean, if someone tries to kick against me, I guess I could say I've kicked a 50-yarder before, so that's kind of my bragging point there.
Thank you, of course, to the Kindred Vikings for letting me come out to practice and talk to Riley. Riley, don't let the fact that your sister beat you out for that kicking job get you down. You still got Minnesota coming up.
Can't do him like that.
No, I mean, he was the first to admit. So I mean, he even said, he was like, yeah, I got kind of tasked with the job my freshman year. I was really not good at it, and then Jordan came in and beat him for it. And then next thing you know, she teaches him how to kick a little bit better, and now he's the kicker. Coming up next this week on Valley News Live, a lot of fun stuff. Obviously, a lot of the focus is going to be on North Dakota State playing at U.S. Bank Stadium. Mm-hmm. We're going to have sound from North Dakota State's football players today about getting to play in that game. So be sure to tune in to Valley News Live. And if, say, you're not listening to this on Tuesday when it comes out, you should be, but it's fine. Some people are late.
It's okay.
You can go back on our website, valleynewslive.com, and listen to what they had to say about it. Jack, we're finally going to get the story on the air of Quincy Vaughn switching from quarterback to tight end.
It's been a busy week, so
it's been a very busy
we'll
week.
get this down.
But no, and that one has been in the works for a while, and you said you got some really good stuff up at UND from it, so we'll get that on this week, so stay tuned for that. Minnesota high school football begins, because we haven't had enough to do with the North Dakota side of things.
Throw it in.
One of our big games that we have coming up, we'll talk about when I say the Friday Night Live lineup, but we do have a game on Thursday as well for football day in Minnesota.
Yeah.
The Moorhead Spuds in action at home on Thursday night to kick off their season, so we will be there, of course. Friday Night Live for week 2 officially, because we had week 0. Big one, DGF and Barnesville. Two powers at their respective levels. Barnesville at 2A, DGF at 3A. Both went to their state championship games last year. They had different results. DGF falling in one of the more shocking ways I've ever seen.
Yeah.
With one of the wildest plays I've ever seen. And Barnesville winning their first ever state title. So big stuff coming up there. We're going to be in West Fargo for our 3A teams matching up. Davies at Cheyenne and Shanley at West Fargo. And then Kindred just keeps getting these high-profile games to start the year.
Yeah,
they're going to be hosting Hillsborough Central Valley. So that's what we have on deck for right now. We're, of course, going to be looking to add more. We'll see what we can get through various sources. I will not reveal my source. You can't get me to.
Hyper-secret sources.
Yes. Top-secret media information. Mm-hmm. But no, that's what the Friday Night Live lineup looks like right now. Stay tuned to see what we actually get. And then, stay tuned to see what we have coming up this weekend. Fun stuff at U.S. Bank Stadium.
Can't wait.
We're gonna be on the air as much as we possibly can be, with the different delays and whatnot that we have in the shows. So stay tuned. Schedule might look a little weird, but we will be there. Thank you for joining us for another episode of Valley News Live Sports Overtime, and we will see you on TV.